The morning arrives without ceremony in Bracken Hollow. No sirens cut through the streets. No crowds gather. The town wakes the way it always has, slowly, with porch lights still glowing long after dawn, with damp air pressing low against the houses clustered near the highway. It has been raining since before sunrise. Not a storm, just a persistent freezing drizzle that coats the sidewalks in a thin, glassy sheen. The kind of weather that softens sound. Tires hiss instead of roar. Doors close without a slam. Even voices seem careful, as if the air itself is listening. An unmarked sedan rolls to a stop along a narrow residential block. The engine idles for a moment longer than necessary before shutting off. A second car pulls in behind it, then a third. No one rushes. The people inside already know where they are going. They have rehearsed this walk in their heads for years. Across the street, a modest house sits beneath a maple tree stripped bare by late autumn. The paint along the porch railing has begun to peel, curling back in thin flakes that catch the light. Nothing about the place draws attention. It looks like hundreds of others in this town, solid, practical, meant to last. A place where neighbors wave, where kids once rode bikes in circles until the streetlights came on. A man inside the house stands at his kitchen sink, staring out at the rain. He has not slept much. The clock above the refrigerator hums softly, ticking toward a morning he hoped would never arrive. When the knock comes, it is firm, but not aggressive. A practiced sound. He does not look surprised. He exhales once, long and slow, then turns the handle. Down the block, a woman pauses as she walks her dog, her breath visible in the cold. She watches the figures at the door without fully understanding what she is seeing. Something about the stillness feels wrong. Bracken Hollow is used to quiet, but not this kind, the kind that settles after a question has finally been asked out loud. Word moves faster than the rain, it always has. By the time the first cruiser eases into position at the corner, phones are already buzzing inside kitchens and break rooms. A name begins to circulate, spoken softly, then more confidently. A name most people recognize. A name that has lived comfortably here for a long time. No one says the other name. Not yet. Beyond the neighborhood, traffic moves steadily along the interstate. Tractor trailers throw mist into the air as they pass over a concrete overpass that cuts through a shallow ravine. From above, the drop below is easy to miss. Trees and brush fill the gap, hiding the ground from casual view. Drivers cross it every day without thinking. They have for decades. Beneath that overpass, the earth slopes gently toward a narrow drainage channel. Fallen leaves cling to the mud along its edge, darkened by weeks of rain. In winter, the cold settles here first. Air sinks into the ravine and stays, turning breath sharp and unforgiving. It is a place the town learned long ago not to look at for too long. Years earlier, though no one marked the day with any special care, this was where a body was found. The official language used at the time was calm and efficient. Exposure. Accident. No sign of foul play. The weather had been bad, they said. The night had been cold. Things happen. The words were printed, filed, and repeated until they hardened into something that sounded like truth. But truth, as it turns out, has a way of changing shape when light finally reaches it from a different angle. Inside the county courthouse, a single photograph sits on a conference table. It is old, its edges softened by handling. For years, it showed only what people expected to see. A group of teenagers in a basement, music equipment stacked against the wall. A boy standing near the stairs with his head turned slightly away from the camera. Now there is more. The image is wider than anyone remembers. The frame extends just enough to reveal another presence, subtle, almost incidental. A hand rests on the boy's shoulder. The grip is firm, intentional, the kind of touch that leaves no mark but changes the direction of things. The photograph does not explain what happened next. It does not show the rain, or the car, or the dark stretch of road leading away from the house. It does not show the ravine, or the hours that followed. What it does show is that the story people told themselves for decades was incomplete. In a town built on familiarity, that realization lands heavily. The rain continues to fall as the house on the quiet street empties. A door closes. An engine starts. The unmarked cars pull away one by one, tires whispering over wet pavement. Curtains shift as neighbors retreat from their windows, carrying the moment back inside with them. By afternoon, the drizzle will turn to sleet. By nightfall, the temperature will drop again. Somewhere nearby, a woman opens a box she has kept sealed for years. Inside are papers, letters, and photographs arranged with care. She runs her fingers over one image in particular, tracing a familiar outline she never stopped seeing. For the first time in a long while, the cold that has lived beside her begins to loosen its grip. The town will say this all came out of nowhere. It didn't. It came from a place beneath the surface, from details once ignored, from a night that refused to stay buried. To understand how this began, we go back to 1983. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe now. It helps us bring more truth to light. Evan Rourke's world was not large, but it was full. On weekday mornings, it began in a narrow kitchen where the heater rattled before it warmed the room. The walls held the quiet evidence of years lived without spectacle, school photos tacked slightly crooked, a calendar still turned to October, a chipped mug Evan favored even though the handle had cracked long ago. His mother, Nora, woke before him most days, moving carefully so the floorboards would not creak too loudly. She liked to give him those last few minutes of sleep, knowing how often he stayed up late with his notebook balanced on his knees. Evan was 17, tall but not fully settled into his frame, with the restless posture of someone still figuring out where his body belonged. He dressed without much thought, jeans worn thin at the knees, flannel shirts borrowed from the back of his closet when the weather turned cold. He had a habit of leaving his jacket draped over the back of a chair instead of hanging it up, as if he were always planning to leave again soon. At school, Evan moved quietly through the hallways. Teachers remembered him as attentive but distant, the kind of student who listened closely and spoke only when he felt sure. His notebooks were filled not just with assignments, but with sketches along the margins, faces, bridges, stairwells, hands reaching for something just out of frame. When asked about them, he shrugged. He said drawing helped him think. After classes ended, Evan worked a few evenings a week at a small grocery on the edge of Bracken Hollow. He stocked shelves, swept aisles, and learned the unspoken rhythms of the place. The hum of refrigeration units, the soft clatter of carts, the way regular customers greeted him by name. It wasn't a job he planned to keep forever, but it gave him something steady. Something that proved he could take care of himself, at least a little. He saved most of his pay in an envelope tucked into his desk drawer. Inside, along with the folded bills, was a photograph he had taken himself. A view from the interstate overpass at dusk, the town spread out below in muted color. He liked the way the light fell there, how the road seemed to hover over everything else. He told a friend once that he wanted to leave Bracken Hollow someday, but he wanted to remember it too. You don't really know a place, he said, until you see how it looks when you're about to go. Among his friends, Evan was the listener. He laughed easily, but he rarely pushed himself to the center of attention. At parties, he lingered near doorways or staircases, close enough to be part of things without being fully exposed. He noticed moods shifting before others did, the way a room could tilt without anyone saying a word. Sometimes that awareness made him feel older than his age. Sometimes it made him tired. Music was another quiet refuge. Evan kept a guitar propped against his bedroom wall, its strings slightly out of tune. He practiced in short bursts, stopping when he hit the same mistake twice in a row. He preferred songs that left space between notes, melodies that didn't rush toward resolution. When he played, the house felt fuller, as if something unspoken had been given permission to exist. Nora watched all of this with a careful kind of pride. She knew her son was sensitive in a way the world did not always reward. She worried, but she did not hover. They spoke most easily in the spaces between tasks: washing dishes, folding laundry, driving in silence with the radio low. Evan told her about school, about work, about nothing in particular. He did not tell her everything. Teenagers rarely do. On the afternoon before the party, Evan came home later than usual. The sky had already begun to darken, the air heavy with the promise of rain. He dropped his backpack by the door and went straight to his room. A few minutes later, he emerged holding his jacket, the one lined with fleece that Nora had bought him 2 winters earlier. She noticed the fraying cuff and made a mental note to fix it. "Don't stay out too late," she said, the way parents always do. "I won't," Evan replied, automatically. He hesitated, then added, "I'll call if I need a ride." That was the rhythm they had settled into, small assurances, rarely tested. Before he left, Evan stopped at the kitchen table and wrote something on a scrap of paper. It wasn't a letter, not really. Just a few lines, half-formed thoughts. He folded it once and slipped it into the pocket of his jacket. Later, no one would remember exactly what it said, only that his handwriting had been careful, deliberate, as if he were practicing how to be understood. The party was not unusual by Bracken Hollow standards. A basement cleared of furniture, speakers stacked against the wall, a rotating cast of familiar faces. Someone's parents were out of town. Someone else promised to keep things under control. The air was warm, crowded, loud enough to blur the edges of conversation. Evan arrived with friends and stayed close to them at first. He accepted a drink he did not finish. He laughed at jokes that weren't especially funny. At some point, he drifted toward the stairs, leaning against the wall where he could watch without being watched too closely. A photograph was taken around then. Evan did not know it would matter. He barely registered the camera, the brief flash of light. In the image, he looks like what he was present, uncertain, still intact. Later that night, the weather changed. Rain turned sharp, then colder. Sleet tapped against basement windows, tracing thin lines down the glass. Evan stepped outside for air at least once, pulling his jacket tighter around himself. He told someone he wasn't feeling great. Someone said he'd be fine. The night moved on. The last confirmed moment anyone could place him inside the house came and went without comment. When Nora woke the next morning, Evan's bed was empty. At first, she assumed he had stayed over at a friend's place. By noon, the worry had begun to press in, quiet but insistent. By evening, it had settled into her chest with weight and permanence. The jacket Evan wore that night would not come home with him, neither would the folded paper in its pocket. The guitar remained propped against the wall, the last chord he practiced still unresolved. What Bracken Hollow lost that night was not just a teenager, but a future that had been forming slowly, carefully, in ordinary rooms and half-finished thoughts. To understand how this began, we are still moving closer to the moment when everything tipped. The night Evan Rourke disappeared unfolded without a single dramatic break. It moved in increments, small decisions, minor delays, moments that felt ordinary at the time and later refused to line up. By early evening, the rain had already settled into Bracken Hollow. Not heavy enough to keep people inside, not light enough to ignore. The streets shone under the streetlights, reflecting yellow and white in uneven patterns. Leaves clung to curbs and gutters, pressed flat by passing tires. The temperature hovered just above freezing, the kind of cold that seeps in slowly and stays. The party began shortly after 7. Music filtered up from the basement windows in low, distorted pulses. Cars lined the street in no particular order, some pulled halfway onto lawns, others idling briefly before engines cut off. People came and went in groups, laughing as they stamped water from their shoes. Inside, the basement lights were dim, a single bulb near the stairs casting a soft, uneven glow across the room. Evan arrived just after 8 with 2 friends. Witnesses would later agree on that much. He wore his fleece-lined jacket and carried nothing else. He moved through the room carefully, greeting people he knew, nodding at those he didn't. At 8:17 p.m., according to the timestamp later recovered from a photograph, Evan stood near the bottom of the stairs. His head was turned slightly away from the camera, his expression unreadable. Someone stood just out of frame. Between 8:30 and 9, the basement grew warmer and louder. The air thickened with the smell of damp clothes and spilled drinks. A window near the ceiling rattled as the wind picked up outside. Evan accepted a drink and set it down untouched. At 8:41, one witness remembered him sitting on the stairs, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. Another recalled him laughing near the speakers at 9. These statements would later be logged without comment, treated as compatible even though they were not. At 9:06 p.m., Evan stepped outside. The side door opened into a narrow yard slick with rain. The cold hit harder there, sharper, the kind that makes breath catch. Evan stood under the small overhang, pulling his jacket tighter, watching the rain trace lines down the siding. He told someone he felt sick. He said he needed air. The door closed behind him, muting the music. He came back inside within minutes. That much is certain. Multiple people would later place him again near the stairs, quieter than before. The basement clock read 9:18 when someone adjusted the playlist. The song changed. The room shifted. No one marked the moment. Sometime after 9:30, the rain turned to sleet. Pellets of ice struck the windows, sharp and irregular. The sound carried even through the music. A few people moved upstairs to look outside. Someone joked about the weather getting worse. Evan did not go with them. He stayed near the stairs, one hand resting on the rail. A photograph taken around then captured only part of the scene. What it left out would matter later. At 9:52 p.m., according to a phone log, one attendee called for a ride home. Evan was still inside the house. This fact would not surface for years. The next clear moment comes at 10:11 p.m. A witness reported seeing Evan near the side door again, this time speaking to Derek Vance. The exchange was brief. No one remembered the words. They remembered the posture. Evan's shoulders slightly hunched. Derek leaning in, one hand raised in a gesture that could have meant anything. At 10:14 p.m., Evan was seen outside once more. The rain had become a mix of sleet and freezing drizzle. The yard glistened under the porch light. Evan stood near the fence, head down, breathing hard. Someone inside shut the door to keep out the cold. Music swelled again, sealing the basement from the night. From this point forward, the timeline fractures. Some would later say Evan left on his own, heading down the street toward the highway. Others insisted he was still around at 10:30. One person claimed he offered Evan a ride and was waved off. Another said Evan never asked. No one reported seeing him walk toward the interstate. By 11, the party had thinned. Cars pulled away, tires hissing on wet pavement. The basement lights were turned off one by one. The house settled into quiet. Evan did not return. The night grew colder. The sleet continued, coating everything in a thin, treacherous layer. Air sank into the low places, the drainage channels, the ravines beneath the overpass. Sound traveled differently there, muffled and distant. Just after midnight, a vehicle crossed the interstate overpass. Maintenance records would later show no roadwork, no closures, nothing to note. Traffic cameras were not installed at that time. The stretch of road passed without record. Morning came slowly. By first light, the rain had eased, leaving behind a landscape washed clean and unforgiving. Nora Rourke woke to silence. Evan's bed was untouched. His shoes were still by the door. At first, she waited. By mid-morning, she began to call. Friends answered with uncertainty, then concern. By early afternoon, the waiting had turned into searching. Police logged Evan as missing shortly after dusk. Officers drove the familiar streets, shining lights into yards and alleyways. They checked the house where the party had been held, noting the damp ground near the side door, the trampled leaves. Inside, the basement smelled faintly of spilled beer and stale air. No one mentioned the photograph. No one mentioned the timing. The search expanded outward, following the logic of proximity. Crews walked the edges of the neighborhood. the wooded strips near the highway, the drainage channels that cut beneath the road. The ravine under the overpass was searched briefly and dismissed. From above, it looked empty. From below, it was already holding cold. 6 days later, a maintenance worker noticed something out of place. He had pulled his truck onto the shoulder near the overpass to check a drainage grate clogged with leaves. The rain earlier that week had been heavy, and the water still pooled along the concrete. As he walked down the slope, his boots slid slightly in the mud. He caught himself and looked up. At first, he thought it was debris, a bundle of fabric caught among branches. Then he saw the shape, too still, too deliberate. Evan lay at the base of the ravine, partially shielded by brush. His jacket was zipped most of the way up, damp and stiff with cold. One shoe was caked with mud, the other cleaner, as if it had not touched the ground the same way. Leaves clung to his hair. His face was turned slightly to the side. The air down there was colder than it had been anywhere else that morning. Police arrived and marked the area. Photographs were taken, notes were made. The official assessment came quickly. Exposure, hypothermia. The weather had been bad. Teenagers sometimes make poor choices, but small details resisted that explanation. The position of Evan's body suggested placement rather than collapse. The distribution of mud on his shoes did not match a long walk through the ravine. There were abrasions on his arms inconsistent with slipping alone. His jacket pocket was empty where something folded might have been kept. Most telling of all was the time. Based on the condition of the body and the weather records, Evan had not been there for 6 full days. He had been placed in the ravine later than the night he disappeared. This discrepancy was noted once quietly and then set aside. By the end of the week, the case was effectively closed. The party house returned to normal. The basement was cleaned. The photograph was cropped. The overpass resumed its role as an unremarkable stretch of road. But one detail lingered, unresolved and unexplained. No one could say, with certainty, how Evan had traveled the distance from that warm basement to the cold ravine beneath the highway. There were no footprints leading the way. No witnesses who saw him walk it. No clear reason he would choose it. And yet, he ended up there. In the weeks after Evan Rourke was found, the investigation did not end so much as it thinned out. The initial energy gave way to routine, and routine to repetition. Officers returned to the party house, then returned again, asking the same questions in slightly different orders, hoping a detail might loosen. It never did. The first theory leaned on simplicity. Evan had been drinking. The weather had been unforgiving. Teenagers made poor decisions. An officer explained this to Nora Rourke in a quiet office, hands folded, voice careful. He said exposure deaths happened quickly. He said the ravine was closer than it looked. He said sometimes there was nothing more to find. Nora listened, nodding, then asked how Evan's shoes could tell 2 different stories. The officer wrote something down and moved on. Another theory rose when someone mentioned a fight. A neighbor claimed he heard shouting near the side yard. A classmate said Evan had looked upset earlier in the week. Investigators followed it, pulling attendance records, calling parents, tracing rumors until they ran into walls of uncertainty. One young man was brought in twice, his story changing only in tone. He insisted he left before 10. He insisted he never saw Evan outside. He insisted on a lawyer the 3rd time. The file thickened. The theory did not. Media attention arrived in short bursts. A local paper ran a headline about unanswered questions. A television reporter stood near the overpass, coat collar turned up, describing the ravine below without descending into it. After a few days, the coverage faded. There were other stories. Winter was coming. By January, the case had settled into a pattern. Each week brought a new angle that led nowhere. Someone suggested Evan might have wandered toward the river instead of the highway. Crews searched the banks, their boots breaking thin ice along the edges. They found nothing. Another tip placed Evan in a car headed east. Investigators canvassed gas stations, asking clerks to remember a night that looked like every other night. They could not. The photographs from the party were reviewed and reduced to what seemed relevant. The one image that included Evan near the stairs was copied and filed. Its edges were neat. No one asked what had been removed. When Nora requested all photographs, she was told she had them. In March, a supervisor suggested narrowing the scope. Resources were limited. Other cases were waiting. He used the word priority. The word landed heavily in the room. An officer who had walked the ravine twice argued there were unresolved inconsistencies. He said the body's position bothered him. He said the timeline didn't sit right. The supervisor acknowledged the concern and asked if there was evidence to support a different conclusion. There wasn't. Not the kind that counted. A second suspect emerged that spring, briefly and noisily. A drifter had been arrested in a neighboring county, his record thick with small offenses. Someone remembered seeing a strange car near the overpass that night. Investigators drove out to interview him, their questions sharpened by fatigue. The man laughed at first, then grew defensive. He had an alibi. It checked out. The lead collapsed in less than 48 hours. The family felt each rise and fall as a physical thing. Nora learned to read the posture of officers when they knocked. Upright meant possibility. Slouched meant apology. Her kitchen table filled with notes, names, and dates, arranged carefully as if order could be coaxed into existence. She asked for reports and received summaries. She asked for specifics and received reassurances. At a meeting in late spring, an officer explained the process again. He said they had followed every lead. He said the weather record supported exposure. He said there was no evidence of a struggle. Nora told him about the paper Evan had folded and placed in his jacket pocket. She said it was missing. The officer asked if it could have fallen out. She said it could not have. The officer wrote something down and did not look up. As summer arrived, the case lost momentum. Detectives were reassigned. The file moved to a different shelf. When Nora called, she spoke to people who needed to read Evan's name before remembering it. One investigator admitted, quietly, that without new information, there was little they could do. He said cases like this sometimes reopened years later. He did not say how many did not. In the fall, a small inquest was held. The conclusion remained unchanged. Accidental death, exposure. The language was firm, final. The room felt smaller as the words were read. Nora did not argue. She took the papers home and added them to the box. Years passed in increments that felt both endless and fast. The town returned to itself. New families moved into old houses. The party house changed owners. The basement was repainted. The overpass was resurfaced. Traffic increased. The ravine grew thicker with brush. Every few years, the case stirred briefly. An anniversary. A new detective with fresh eyes. A rumor that refused to die. Each time, the same obstacles rose up. Witnesses who could not remember. Records that could not be found. Evidence that had degraded or been discarded according to policy. One investigator admitted that some early notes were missing. He said that was not unusual. He said it did not mean anything. Nora kept calling. She learned the vocabulary of procedure. She learned what could be requested and what could not. She learned how to phrase questions so they would be answered at all. She learned which offices returned calls and which did not. Her persistence was noted, sometimes admired, sometimes resented. There were moments of false hope. A letter from a man who claimed to know something, but asked for money. A call from a woman who said she had seen Evan days after the party, then could not be reached again. A tip about a car that matched a description too vague to be useful. Each one pulled the family forward, then dropped them back where they started. Investigators felt it too. One detective confided to a colleague that the case bothered him more than it should. He said it felt unfinished in a way he could not explain. He said the answers seemed close but unreachable, like something seen through fog. The colleague told him to let it go. He said you couldn't save everyone. He said the job would eat you alive if you tried. By the late 1980s, the file had grown thick but inert, It contained reports, transcripts, photographs, and conclusions that contradicted one another without consequence. It contained the shape of effort without its outcome. It contained a life reduced to paper. The media returned once more, briefly, when a regional outlet ran a retrospective on unresolved cases. Evans' photograph appeared again, cropped and familiar. The article quoted an official who said there was no reason to revisit the findings. The comment section filled with speculation, then emptied. Nothing changed. In the early 1990s, a detective assigned to cold cases made a quiet attempt to reopen the file. He walked the ravine again, older now, slower. He reviewed the autopsy report and circled passages that troubled him. He requested access to original negatives from the party. He was told they were not available. He asked why. He was told they had never been logged. At a meeting with supervisors, he argued that the timeline was wrong. He said witnesses could not all be right. He said the absence of footprints in sleet should mean something. He was asked what he proposed to do about it. He had no answer that fit within the constraints of budget and time. The attempt ended without ceremony. The detective retired a year later. The case remained. For Nora, the weight of time became its own kind of evidence. She marked anniversaries with quiet rituals. She kept Evans' jacket sealed, folded carefully, as if it might still hold warmth. She reread the same reports, seeing new implications in old language. She learned to live alongside uncertainty, but she did not accept it. When she asked once if the case was considered closed, an official answered with practiced neutrality. He said the findings stood. He said new evidence could change things. He did not say where that evidence might come from. By the end of the decade, the file was moved to storage. The label read closed in block letters that did not reflect the truth of it. The closure was administrative, not moral. It was a decision made by process, not by understanding. Bracken Hollow absorbed the silence and moved on. The ravine beneath the overpass remained, collecting cold air and debris, holding its shape without explanation. Cars passed overhead day and night, their drivers unaware of the questions pressed into the ground below. For the family, the cost of the collapse was measured in years without answers. For investigators, it was measured in the quiet knowledge that something had been left behind. For the town, it was easier to believe the story that required the least disturbance. The file was closed with a date and a signature and set aside. Nothing about it felt finished. Time does not move evenly after a loss. It stretches in some places and collapses in others, leaving behind a landscape that feels familiar but never quite the same. For Nora Rourke, the years after Evans' death settled into a rhythm she did not choose. Mornings arrived whether she wanted them to or not. Seasons changed without asking permission. The house adjusted around her absence of certainty. The calendar pages turned, and with each one, Evans' face grew older in memory while remaining fixed in photographs. She began writing to him not long after the case went quiet. The letters were not addressed anywhere. They stayed in a drawer beneath her bed, folded and refolded until the creases softened. Some were only a few lines. Others filled entire pages. She wrote about ordinary things: repairs around the house, neighbors moving away, the way the maple tree out front lost another branch in a storm. She wrote about questions she could not ask anyone else. She wrote because silence, left alone, had a way of becoming unbearable. The photographs aged too. Colors faded, edges curled. The image of Evan near the basement stairs appeared again, and again in newspapers and flyers, each time losing a little more clarity. Nora noticed details others did not. The way his shoulder angled slightly forward. The way the light fell across his jacket. She wondered what had been just outside the frame. Friends moved on in uneven ways. Some left Bracken Hollow entirely, chasing work or distance or both. Others stayed, married, raised children, built lives that folded over the past like fresh layers of paint. When they saw Nora at the grocery store or the post office, they smiled carefully. They asked how she was doing in the way people do when they already know the answer, but hope it has changed. Holidays were the hardest. Evan's birthday arrived every year with quiet insistence. Nora marked it alone most times, lighting a candle at the kitchen table, letting it burn until it guttered out. The flame became a small ritual, something she could control. A reminder that memory did not have to be loud to endure. As the town changed, the places tied to Evan's last night shifted too. The party house was sold, then sold again. The basement was remodeled, the stairs replaced. New families moved in, unaware of the history beneath their feet. The overpass was resurfaced, its concrete smoothed and brightened. Traffic increased. The ravine below grew denser, brush filling in where bare earth had once been visible. Nature did not erase what happened there, but it did not preserve it either. Every few years, someone would call. A journalist working on a series about unsolved cases. A college student writing a paper. A producer asking if Nora would consider an interview. Each conversation began with sympathy and ended with the same gentle explanation. There was nothing new to report. Nora learned to answer with restraint. She did not want Evan's story to become entertainment. She wanted it to become truth. Still, she spoke when she had to. She spoke because forgetting felt worse. Inside her home, the box grew heavier. Reports, letters, clippings, photographs, everything the case had left behind gathered there. Nora organized it carefully, labeling folders, adding dates. She treated the materials with the respect others reserved for heirlooms. This was Evan's legacy now, she thought. Not answers, but persistence. The jacket remained sealed in plastic, folded just as it had been returned. She took it out only once a year, checking the seams, the pockets, the places where a folded paper might once have rested. She never found what was missing. The absence itself became part of the object's meaning. Time pressed on. In the late 1990s, computers began appearing in the county offices. Paper records were scanned, some more carefully than others. Files were moved, renamed, stored off-site. Nora noticed that requests took longer now, not shorter. The system was changing, but it was not becoming more accessible. She adapted anyway. She learned how to file formal requests. She learned the language of public records. She learned which forms mattered and which did not. Persistence, she discovered, could be taught. Journalists returned with new tools. One of them, a young reporter with a careful manner, spent weeks reading through the file. He noticed gaps Nora had pointed out years earlier. He asked about original photographs. He asked about missing logs. He asked why certain statements contradicted one another without comment. The article he published did not solve anything, but it shifted the tone. For the first time in years, the case felt unsettled again. Bracken Hollow reacted with quiet discomfort. Some residents wrote letters to the editor defending the original conclusions. Others stayed silent. A few reached out to Nora privately, offering small pieces of memory they had once dismissed. She listened to all of it, sorting possibility from regret. A decade later, technology shifted again. Digital archives expanded. Databases grew searchable in ways they had never been before. Nora received a call from a clerk who said an old box of records had been relocated during renovations. It might contain unsorted materials from the early 1980s. The clerk did not promise anything. She did not sound hopeful. She sounded procedural. Nora thanked her anyway. The call did not change anything immediately. Months passed, then years. But something had been set in motion. A file had been touched. A record had been moved. In the long life of a cold case, these were not small things. Friends noticed Nora's quiet shift in posture. The way she leaned forward when she spoke. The way she listened more intently. She did not claim hope. She did not allow herself that luxury. But she felt movement where there had been none. She wrote another letter to Evan and placed it in the drawer. This one was shorter. She told him the world had changed again. She told him people were still looking. She told him she was still here. The candle burned down to wax and smoke, as it always did. And somewhere, in a building no one visited unless they had to, A box waited to be opened. Where are you watching from tonight? Drop an emoji in the comments. The arrest comes early, before most of Bracken Hollow is fully awake. Derek Vance is stepping out onto his porch when the unmarked cars pull in. The morning air is sharp, cold enough to sting the lungs. Frost clings to the edges of the steps. He pauses when he sees the badges, the practiced movements, the familiarity of faces he has known for years. There is no shouting, no resistance. The words are delivered evenly, rehearsed but not unkind. He listens without interruption. Neighbors watch from behind curtains and half-open doors. Some recognize the name immediately. Others recognize the house. The scene does not feel explosive. It feels overdue. A quiet correction arriving decades late. At the station, Derek says little. He asks for an attorney. He denies intent. He insists the night was chaos, that things happened too fast, that no one meant for anyone to get hurt. He does not deny being there. He does not deny touching Evan. He does not explain the drive. Prosecutors move carefully. The case is old. Memories have frayed. Evidence has aged. What they have is alignment, not abundance. A photograph. A corrected timeline. Injury analysis that contradicts accident. Proof of procedural interference. It is enough to charge, but not enough to guarantee anything. The trial begins under gray skies. Inside the courtroom, the light is flat and unforgiving, filtered through high windows that do not open. Wooden benches bear the quiet weight of observers who have waited years to sit here. Nora Rourke takes her place near the aisle, her hands folded, posture steady. She does not look at Derek when he is led in. She has already seen him enough. Testimony unfolds slowly. Investigators walk the jury through the original conclusions, then dismantle them piece by piece. A forensic pathologist explains how injury timing matters, how cold changes the body, how assumptions can calcify into error. A records clerk describes the discovery of the unsorted box, her voice precise, procedural. The forensic imaging specialist explains the uncropped photograph, the ring, the grip, the minutes that were erased. When the photograph is shown, the room shifts. It is not dramatic. It is quiet. Jurors lean forward slightly, as if proximity might help them understand what they are seeing. The image lingers on the screen long enough to be uncomfortable. Witnesses from the party testify next. Some are defensive, some are evasive. A few admit, in careful language, that they stayed quiet because it felt easier. One acknowledges the pressure of knowing everyone involved. Another says he assumed the adults knew what they were doing. No one claims malice. That absence weighs heavily. Derek takes the stand late in the proceedings. He speaks in measured tones, describing the night that got out of hand. He says Evan was sick, unsteady. He says he offered help. He says he drove Evan because he thought getting him home would calm things down. He says Evan panicked near the overpass, stumbled, fell. He says he didn't know what to do after. The prosecution does not press for spectacle. They ask about the timeline. They ask about the decision to leave Evan in the ravine. They ask about the photograph, the cropping, the failure to speak up afterward. Derek's answers grow shorter. His certainty thins. In closing arguments, the attorneys speak plainly. This is not a case about a monster, the prosecutor says. It is a case about choices made under pressure, followed by years of silence that turned those choices into something worse. It is about a teenager who did not make it home because people who could have helped chose convenience over responsibility. The defense argues doubt. They argue memory. They argue that time has distorted everything. They argue that regret is not proof. The jury deliberates for 2 days. When they return, the courtroom holds its breath. The verdict is not absolute. Derek is found guilty of a lesser charge related to unlawful restraint and abandonment, not murder. The words land with complexity. Relief and disappointment occupy the same space. Nora closes her eyes briefly. She exhales. It is not everything. It is something. Sentencing follows weeks later. Derek stands as the judge speaks, hands clasped in front of him. The sentence reflects the age of the case, the nature of the conviction, the years already passed. It does not feel like retribution. It feels like acknowledgement. Outside, reporters ask if justice has been served. Nora answers carefully. She says the truth has been recognized. She says that matters. She does not say she is healed. Detective Mara Klein watches from the edge of the crowd. She thinks about the years the case sat untouched, the small decisions that delayed this moment. She thinks about how easily it could have remained buried. She does not feel triumph. She feels gravity. Bracken Hollow absorbs the outcome slowly. Some residents express anger that it took so long. Others insist the past should have stayed buried. Conversations unfold in kitchens and diners, cautious and unresolved. The town does not fracture. It adjusts. For the family, closure does not arrive all at once. It comes in fragments. In the quiet knowledge that Evan did not disappear into nothing. In the public record, now corrected. In the photograph restored to its full frame. The ravine remains beneath the overpass, unchanged. Cars pass overhead as they always have. But the silence there is different now. It no longer belongs solely to forgetting. Justice, when it finally arrives, does not erase the years that came before it. It does not return what was lost. It stands imperfect and restrained as a marker. This happened, it mattered. And it was not nothing. The breakthrough does not announce itself with drama. It arrives quietly, the way truth often does, after persistence has worn down resistance. It begins with a box. The box has been moved twice in its lifetime, each transfer logged with minimal detail. It sat for years in a county storage annex behind the courthouse, labeled with a date range and nothing else. During a renovation, it was relocated again, placed on a metal shelf beneath fluorescent lights that hummed steadily through the day. No one opened it. No one needed to. The label said unsorted, and that was usually enough to ensure delay. When Detective Mara Klein requests access to unsorted materials connected to early 1980s cases, the clerk does not sound hopeful. She says there are a lot of boxes. She says most of them contain duplicates. She says the odds are low. Klein thanks her and files the request anyway. 2 weeks later, the box is rolled into a small records room on a cart with a loose wheel. The air smells like paper and dust and something metallic. Klein signs a log, puts on gloves, and lifts the lid. Inside are manila envelopes, brittle at the corners, their contents shifted by time. Some hold carbon copies of reports already in the file. Others hold nothing at all. Near the bottom, wrapped in plain paper, is a thin envelope marked only with a handwritten note. Party roll, October '83. Klein pauses. She opens it carefully and slides out a strip of photographic negatives. They are intact, glossy in places where fingers once held them. She holds the strip up to the light and recognizes the scene immediately. A basement, teenagers, the stairs. This is not the image everyone knows. The frame is wider. The composition different. Evan Rourke stands near the stairs, his jacket collar turned up slightly, his expression caught between attention and withdrawal. And there, just inside the frame, is a hand resting on his shoulder. The fingers are curled with intention. The hand belongs to Derek Vance. Klein does not speak. She lowers the negative, already understanding the implications. The photograph is logged, sealed, and transported under modern chain of custody procedures to the State Forensic Imaging Lab. The analysis begins with digitization. Technicians use high-resolution scanners designed to extract detail from aging emulsion layers. Under magnification, the image sharpens. The hand becomes clearer. The ring on one finger reflects light in a distinctive way, matching photographs from the same year. The positioning of bodies reveals proximity and posture that contradict long-standing statements. More significant than the identity is the timing. The negative sleeve bears lab markings consistent with processing standards from the early 1980s. A forensic document examiner confirms the ink composition and handwriting style match the period. Combined with chemical aging analysis of the film, the photograph is placed within a narrow time window. It was taken 23 minutes later than the moment investigators had recorded as Evans' departure from the house. That single adjustment fractures the official timeline. Klein requests a comprehensive re-evaluation. A forensic pathologist reviews the original autopsy photographs and notes alongside modern biomechanical models. The injuries on Evans' arms and torso are reinterpreted. Several occurred before prolonged cold exposure, consistent with restraint and a short distance fall rather than collapse after wandering. Weather records are overlaid with body cooling estimates. The math does not support the original conclusion. A separate analysis examines the negative envelope itself. On the interior flap, technicians recover a low-level touch DNA profile. It is degraded, incomplete, but usable. It does not introduce a new suspect. It confirms handling by Derek Vance, contradicting his earlier claim that he never touched the camera equipment that night. The photograph does not solve the case. It reopens it. Investigators reconstruct the night again, this time anchored by the corrected timeline. Witness statements that once seemed compatible now contradict one another sharply. The revised window places Evan inside the house during a period previously treated as empty. Road maintenance logs from the interstate overpass are recovered through public record requests and synchronized with traffic flow estimates. No closures, no disruptions. A vehicle could have stopped briefly without notice. The ravine beneath the overpass is reconsidered not as a destination reached on foot, but as a location accessed by car. The distribution of mud on Evans' shoes aligns with placement rather than a long walk. The absence of footprints during sleet conditions becomes meaningful instead of incidental. Then comes the twist. As the imaging lab documents the photograph's history, technicians notice the crop line on the version circulated for decades. It is precise, clean, made with a straight-edge tool common in local print shops at the time. The crop predates the photograph's entry into official evidence channels. Records place a volunteer photographer and auxiliary officer at the processing lab that weekend. He is related to Derek Vance. The decision to crop is explained later as an attempt to avoid confusion. No report documents the change. No approval is recorded. The betrayal is not dramatic, it is procedural. When Klein presents the findings to prosecutors, the room is quiet. The case shifts from doubt to accountability, not through a confession, but through alignment. Timeline, injury analysis, and image history converge. The photograph becomes the keystone that holds the structure together. Nora Rourke is called in on a gray afternoon. The weather has turned cold again, familiar in its persistence. Klein lays the uncropped image on the table and waits. Nora studies it without speaking. She traces the outline of Evans' shoulder, then stops at the hand. "They were with him," she says. It is not a question. Outside, news spreads quickly and unevenly. Some residents react with disbelief, others with relief. A few reach out quietly, offering memories they once dismissed as insignificant. The town does not celebrate. It adjusts, slowly, to the idea that the past has been misrepresented. For Klein, the work continues. Warrants are drafted, interviews reopened. The photograph circulates among investigators who once believed the case finished. The silence that held for decades begins to thin. The breakthrough does not bring closure. It brings movement. For the family, that is enough to breathe again. Hit the like button if you believe justice always finds its way. In the months after the verdict, Bracken Hollow settles into a quieter version of itself. Nothing dramatic announces the change. The town still wakes early. Traffic still hums across the overpass. Rain still arrives without warning. But the way people speak what they allow themselves to say has shifted. For Nora Rourke, mornings begin with light instead of dread. Not relief, exactly, but a gentler weight. The box of records remains on the shelf, no longer growing. She opens it less often now, not because it matters less, but because it finally rests. The photograph, restored to its full frame, sits in a simple folder. She does not hide it. She does not display it either. It exists where it belongs, intact, acknowledged. She returns once to the ravine beneath the overpass, choosing a day when the air is clear and the ground is firm. She stands at the edge, listening to cars pass overhead, and feels the place release some of its hold. The cold that once collected here seems less insistent, not gone but changed. She leaves without ceremony. The family speaks of Evan in the present tense more often now, not because they forget the loss, but because memory has room to breathe. They remember his patience, his drawings, the way he lingered in doorways. They remember the jacket draped over a chair, the guitar left slightly out of tune. These details no longer feel like evidence. They feel like inheritance. For Detective Mara Klein, the case becomes a marker in her career, not for its outcome, but for what it taught her about endurance. She continues her work with a sharpened patience, mindful of the quiet places where truth can wait. She thinks often about how easily the story could have remained unchanged, how close it came to staying buried under routine and convenience. The lesson stays with her. Persistence is not dramatic, but it is decisive. The town learns something too, though not all at once. Conversations surface in kitchens and parking lots, careful at first, then steadier. People acknowledge what they chose not to see. They do not agree on everything. They do not need to. The point is not unanimity. It is honesty. The photograph returns one last time, not as proof, but as symbol. What was once cropped to preserve comfort is now seen in full. It stands for the cost of omission and the power of restoration. It reminds those who look at it that truth is not always hidden, sometimes it is simply trimmed away. Weather moves through Bracken Hollow as it always has. Winter gives way to rain, rain to spring. Light changes the angle of familiar streets. The overpass casts its long shadow at dusk, then releases it. Time continues forward, indifferent and generous in equal measure. This story does not promise that justice will arrive perfectly or swiftly. It suggests something quieter and more durable, that attention matters, that memory can be active, that systems built to conclude can also be asked to reconsider. It suggests that silence, once broken, does not easily return to its old shape. In the end, what remains is not the verdict alone, but the correction of a record and the dignity of being heard. A life is not restored, but it is recognized. A community does not absolve itself, but it does not pretend anymore. That is the work of time when met with persistence. Which case should we tell next? Leave your suggestion below.